So it looks like you've already learned how to handle a lot of different types of events. I wanted to point out to you that there's really a ton of events out in the DOM and in HTML in general. So I'm scrolling down through this huge list of events. You can see that it would be really impossible to try to do every single event. What I'm trying to do is show you different types of events. And there's a new type that I want to show you in this chapter, and it's the on-load events. So things that happen whenever you load or when something is finished loading are pretty important in JavaScript. So we're going to handle that in this chapter. And we're going to do two examples. This one is going to be a pretty simple example that shows you how to do an image load. And this is a pretty typical thing that you work with in JavaScript. You click on an image and perhaps you have to wait until the image is loaded, or you see a preview of a little spinner that shows you that the image is loading, and when the image is finished loading, then you do something like display the image. So we're going to work with that. So let's take a look at the HTML for this page. It's super minimal. All we have here is an image with a class of preview, and it's pointing right now to a thumbnail with an alt tag. Right underneath that, we have a div with a class of overlay. This is going to be an overlay that appears is going to be partially black on top of the entire page while the image is loading, and then it's going to be the background for the new image, which is going to be the high resolution version of the image. I could have done that programmatically, but frankly, we don't really need to go over that. It's pretty easy to do. You've already created several elements programmatically, so we don't have to do that again. Sometimes it's easier just to have the object right there. Let's take a look at the images. You can see that we've got the background image here, and then we have this image of a magnifying glass that we've used before. And then we've also got this GIF right here that is the little spinner that we're going to use. It's an animated GIF that just spins so that we can tell when the image is loading. And then we have a high resolution version of the image as well as a thumbnail. So that's it for the images. Let's take a look at the CSS. We set the background here to a piece of wood. And then we have the image preview right here, which sets the thumbnail to be 100 by 100 pixels, gives you that cursor of the pointer here. And then we have a series of styles for the overlay. So this is the overlay when the project first begins. It's not showing up. That's why it says display none right here. And let's go ahead and do a display block so we could see it. So if I refresh the page, this is what the overlay is going to look like. It's on top of the image, and it's a little bit black, but 70% black. And then it takes up the entire image, and plus I have this Z index of 5,000, which is probably extreme. It just puts that overlay on top of everything. And then we have a style for an image inside the overlay, and this is going to be a big image right here. So this will be the big version of the image. And finally, we have a style for the spinner, the picture that's going to appear while the image is loading. So that's it for style sheets. So let's dig into some of the JavaScript. So we need to write this in here. The first thing we need to do is call the element that we want to attach an event to. So I'll do document, query selector. And what I want to target is img.preview, the image with the class of preview. And then I'm going to add an event listener. And just like before, we're going to target a click event. That's going to call a function, and we're going to pass it along an event, right? And this is going to have a bubbling effect right here, so it needs false. And then I'm going to start off by creating some variables here. So my first variable is going to be low resolution. This is going to be set to the target of the click, which will be the low resolution version of the image, right? So this is going to be the target's source. So this will take us back to the low resolution version. We're going to need that later. And then we're going to need a variable for my overlay. And that's going to be document query selector. We're going to pick the overlay from the DOM. Make sure you do a dot here. Whatever has the class of overlay, right? Next, we're going to create another variable. This is going to be a variable that will hold the high resolution version of the image. So document dot. And then this time, we're going to create an element. And the element we want to create is an image. Next, we're going to need to do the same thing for the spinner. So I'm going to call this my spinner. And that's going to be document.create element. Then I'm going to pass it along another image. So I'm going to create two images or two image tags. They're going to be inside my overlay. One's going to be for the high resolution image. The other one's going to be for my spinner. All right, cool. So next, let's do my overlay. So whenever somebody clicks on the image, I want my overlay style to be display of block. So just like I did before, and as a matter of fact, I probably need to go into the CSS and make sure that my overlay is now display as none, so it doesn't show up at the beginning. Make sure we save that and come back here. Let me go ahead and hide that sidebar so we can get the full screen here. So when somebody clicks on the image, the first thing we need to do is to set the display of the overlay to block. And then I'm going to start doing things to the high resolution version here. So highres.class name, I want to add a class to the high resolution version. And that class is going to be BG image. And then I'm going to set the high resolution location, the SRC attribute to, and this is going to be similar to what we've done before. Since the images are called exactly the same, except that the low resolution is _tn.jpg, then we're going to use the substring method. So we're going to say lowres.substring str, and then say starting at position 0 to the end of this low res image. So lowres.length -7. So that's going to get rid of the _.tn.jpg. And then we're going to go ahead and add back .jpg at the end. And then we're going to do an append child here. So my overlay dot append child, and then we're going to put in this high-res image. So far, if we've done this correctly, the high-resolution version of the image is going to show up when I click on the low-resolution version. Now it works pretty good, and this image is on the hard drive, and I'm calling it from the hard drive, so it's going to load pretty quick. If this image was loading in from a server, it might take some time, especially since I made this image really big on purpose, so that even as I'm loading it from the hard drive, it's taken a while to load up. So I think this is probably like a 10 megapixel image. It would take a long time on a server. So we want to really add a spinner that kind of lets people know, hey, wait until it's finished loading. You're going to see it even on this screen right here, even though I'm loading things from the hard drive. So here's how we add the spinner. We already created the variable that creates the image element. And what we could do is, of course, just like we did with the overlay. So my spinner, class name, and we're going to set it to spinner. Where am I getting these class names from? Remember when we looked at the CSS that these things have predefined style names right here. So this is overlay. This one's supposed to be image, big image. And this one's supposed to be a class name of spinner. So that's where I'm getting those from. Then I'm going to do my spinner dot the location of the spinner. It's in the images folder and it's called spinner.gif. You pronounce that GIF, not GIF. Just remember that. The inventor of it said that you pronounce it GIF. All right, so next, we're just going to append it to the overlay. So we're just going to say my overlay.append child, and then my spinner, which is what we want to add. And so let's check that out. Let's come over here, refresh the page. We click on it, and both the spinner and the large version of the image are going to load. That's pretty cool, but once the image finishes loading, we need to get rid of that spinner or it's going to look pretty silly. So all you got to do that is find out when the load event of that image has executed, because every time you create an image, that image brings in an event, and that event is called load. And so when that image finishes loading, it triggers this load event and you can capture it. And this is the cool thing about these type of events. So far we've been looking at events that you generate by clicking on things or by doing something. Sometimes things generate events by some of the actions that you do. So we're going to say highres.add event listener, and we'll track a load event. So we're tracking a load event of this high-res image, which is this element that we created over here, right? So when that image triggers a load event, then just as with any other event, we're going to call a function. And in this case, I don't really need to pass it the event, so I'm not going to do anything with it. And what do I want to do? I want to get rid of the spinner. So just like we've done before, we say my spinner, and then we have to call the parent node of the spinner. Why? Because we're going to use the remove child method, and the remove child method wants to remove something from its parent. So we call the spinner parent node remove child, and then we say my spinner again. So I need to actually take care of these quotes right here and save it. And then come here and refresh. And now you'll see that the image will load. And as soon as the image loads, there is no spinner. The spinner has been removed. So working with load events is pretty similar to other events, but this is an event that gets generated as a result of another event, the click event. It's a good idea to use this event when working with data that is very large. That way you'll give the user a little bit of visual feedback so that they know what's happening.